Oh. Oh. Oh my god, what? Oh my god. No! Oh my god. No! No! What? What?
We don't know if he's playing.
What?
What'd you do?
What? I beat it!
You what?
What? I beat it!
There's no
What?
way. There's no
You're
way.
not sharing screen,
There's
that's
no way.
crazy! What the fuck?
What?
That's what we were literally just talking
You were
about.
literally saying like...
Oh my god!
You beat it. What?
No, that's crazy.
What?
Wait, share screen, share screen.
Wait, I'm gonna save my replay.
You're fucking.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Dude, that's the that's actually the- no way.
Joking.
No way. No way.
You're joking. Oh.
What the hell? The one time you weren't streaming.
Are you recording?
I am.
Dual
Okay.
audio, please.
No, that...
Oh my.
Show us.
I can't believe I just did that. Rude. Bro, how many attempts did I just play from 0?
5, okay, 6,
Wait.
8, 9, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21
Wait,
attempts.
21 attempts from 0.
Brother.
Yeah.
What was your
In
worst
less
bet
than,
from
it was
zero?
like 6 minutes.
My best from 0 was
And yeah,
51 today, and I just beat it. Cause bro, I was actually just like, I got to the drop and I was like, okay, I need to beat it this attempt. I was like, I really need to beat this like today if in this session if I want to beat it today.
Would I beat this before July?
Wait,
No.
I don't think so. I don't think it's possible. Maybe...
Will you destroy this level? No, I don't think I will. Do you know me? I don't think I will.
Alright, hi. I want to talk about my experience with this level. I'm beginning writing this about an hour after what you just saw, and I still need time for what I just did to actually hit me. I started properly going for Critical Heat 14 months ago, in March of 2025, just after beating Shimmer. Although I had been playing it on the side, along with Shimmer, because I knew it would be my next hardest, and I wanted something I could play before or after my sessions. In hindsight, it was definitely a bad idea to try to immediately do a new hardest straight after what was already the hardest mental challenge I had ever put myself through in this game, especially because there was an almost 50 spot gap between Shimmer and Critical Heat. At the time of beating Shimmer, Chromatic Haze was still my 6th hardest, which is many orders of magnitude easier. Basically, I had beaten much fewer levels close to the top of my skill range than I should have before trying to push my skill ceiling even higher. Then, you can take this pretty bad idea and make it even worse, since I thought I wouldn't find Critical Heat to be too much of a struggle. The level's very sync-based, and almost all of the wave and ship gameplay is easy, which matches extremely well with my skill set. It didn't help that in my first week of playing this I had already achieved some pretty good runs, and thought my speed of progress somewhat comparable to Fog, which I had absolutely destroyed as a new hardest. So, I went on with the expectation that Critical Heat would not take me nearly as long as Shimmer, that I wouldn't have to take any breaks from it, and that it would be relatively smooth. Every single one of those expectations turned out to be laughably wrong. At some point, I started experiencing super mind blocks in the spider part in the drop. I'll touch on this part more later, but what initially felt relatively easy suddenly became an insane wall which I just could not pass from zero. The same thing happened with the end of the build-up queue before the drop, and combining these things meant that I had quite a few sessions where I'd get decent runs but get completely smoked from zero. And it came to a point where it felt like I was repeating the same thing every day with little improvement. I was trying to push through this mind block. I found the level extremely fun, and I knew I'd be able to push through it, but when coursework ramped up again at school and I had to take a break from playing the level, I ended up with little motivation to immediately return to it, since the prospect of repeating the same cycle and being unable to improve did not excite me. So, for the next few months, I beat many other extremes, and I definitely did improve at the game, even beating a new second hardest of Escape Room. After that, I was finally ready to return. However, unfortunately for me, coursework immediately ramped up again, and I very quickly had to stop playing the level again. So I returned later, having a few groups of Critical Heat sessions in September, October and November with some gaps due to coursework. I'm grouping these together because it didn't really feel like I was actually taking a break from the level. I was waiting to play the thing again the whole time during these gaps. I definitely improved in my mind block areas in these sessions, but that's not to say I didn't still find them difficult. I also unlocked a new mind block zone at the start of the duel, which I'll also get into later, but it meant that my best was 88% from back in April for a very long time. The disparity between my progress in runs and from zero became especially apparent when I got 7 to 100 still without getting a new best, although this did give me a boost of confidence which allowed me to get 91 the next day, and then 94 and 95 the day after. At this point, I was getting often 5 or more duel attempts daily, and I knew the completion would happen soon if I just kept playing, but you know how the story goes. Just as before, I got hit with yet more coursework, and the amount of sessions I had spent dealing with my many mind blocks meant that I once again had little motivation to immediately come back to the level. This time, I knew something needed to change if I wanted to actually be able to beat the level the next time I came back to it. For a while, I'd been deciding not to play levels that could pose a decent challenge to me, since I didn't want to try to do that with Critical Heat still hanging over me. However, there were just so many levels I'd been telling myself I'd play after I beat Critical Heat that I was really interested in, and I just decided to play them even if I would find them difficult. From December until close to the end of May, I beat a bunch of hard levels, including Jasmine, which was its own 16-stream mental challenge that I never would have even attempted with my previous mindset. All this resulted in me pushing Fog, which was my second hardest when I started Critical Heat, all the way down to number 10, and also let me diversify my skill set a bit and get more comfortable with the experience of beating hard levels. Since I also knew that the thing that had ultimately caused my breaks from the level to begin with was schoolwork, I decided to leave Critical Heat until at least the end of May, because that was when I would finish my final exams of school and have zero responsibilities for almost the next 5 months before going to university. So, having massively improved at the game and finally finishing my exams, I returned to Critical Heat on the 22nd of May for the final time. On my first session, I could immediately see that I was significantly better than I once was, because I got not only 25 to 100 twice, but 70% and 61% from zero, both of which were at midnight. It was quite crazy to see myself retain my muscle memory so well from before, and this really gave me confidence for the next few days playing. On my second session back, I continued the crazy progress, getting 6 duel attempts, including 91%, which would have been a good session even for November when I'd already been playing the level for weeks beforehand. Then the next day, I had my best session ever on the level, with an insane 12 duel attempts, including 94%, which was a tied second best, and 16 to 100 twice. For the first time in any of my returning grinds, I wasn't really getting stuck in the build-up cube or spider in the drop, and the start of the duel was more manageable because it finally felt like I could actually read the gameplay as I did it, rather than relying on muscle memory. On the next day, I had to leave to go on a 4-day hiking trip at 8 PM, so I really threw everything I had into trying to get the level done, since I knew I was very capable of finishing it off with any duel attempt. But I couldn't match the previous day, and got 6 duel attempts after about 4 hours, and decided not to push myself any harder. It was difficult not to feel a bit disappointed with myself after that session, since the previous day had gone so well, but I knew by now not to dwell on it, since I had plenty of time to play once I came back. So, that brings us to May 29th. I had come back from my trip the evening of the day before, and I was still a little tired, and so I really didn't come into my session with any expectations. I got a couple runs, 25 to 100 and 9 to 94, which were good but nothing I hadn't seen before, and it felt like my consistency was potentially quite fragile too, as would be expected after not playing for a few days. Even worse, just after I started playing from zero, I realised that I only had about 10 minutes left to play the level before I had to go do something else. At this point, I was practically ready to just stop playing right there, since I'd rarely gotten past even 73 in the first 10 minutes playing from zero before, but after getting 51%, when I next got to the drop, I told myself to put everything I had into this one attempt, since it was probably the last chance I'd get on that day. Somehow, the stars aligned, and I managed to lock in hard enough to just beat the level right then and there. If you're wondering why I sound so surprised in my reaction, given I knew I'd beat it soon anyway, that's why. I beat this level at the very time I thought there was effectively no chance I could, and it really is a fitting conclusion to the experience I've had over the past 14 months. This level, more than any other, has shown me extremely obviously how I progress in this game. The amount of times I would get very good runs in a session while I wasn't really thinking too hard, just to then get nowhere from zero because I was mind-blocking something, laid out extremely bare for me just how important of a factor my mindset is when playing this game. Whether or not I died to a part was much less to do with my actual raw skill. I always had the raw skill required to complete every part of the level consistently, but almost entirely due to my internal thought process. It's almost impossible for me to simply not think while playing a level from zero, as I might in runs, so any doubts I had about my ability to do a part essentially led to an immediate death there. It felt like sometimes I could tell myself, I'm probably going to die to this exact click, 20% before the actual click, and be perfectly correct. This realization has significantly changed how I think about practicing levels. For most of my time playing Critical Heat, I basically just did runs on the level so that I have a particular run, say 25 to 100 before going from zero, and leave it at that. I would try to avoid practicing parts too much if I was mind blocked in them, because I thought that it would just contribute even more to the mind block, but after seeing this approach fail over and over again, I shifted my practice to be more confidence oriented. It didn't matter if I'd done one good run from a particular start position. I tried to make sure I felt confident that I could pass every section of the level if I just locked in before going from zero, rather than the kind of, I can do this if I don't mess up my muscle memory kind of attitude. For the longest time I was convinced that this kind of approach wouldn't work for me, since I thought that supposedly locking in from zero would just mean overthinking and dying. I think it was my Jasmine experience that fully solidified that this approach does in fact work for me. I was able to get consistently far attempts on a decently long level, which was both the second hardest and outside my usual skill set, by actually channeling my constant overthinking into reading the level ahead of me and trying to use more visual cues instead of just relying on audio cues and muscle memory while actively trying to turn my brain off. Applying the same approach to this level, actually trying to read the gameplay instead of just observing it happen while I clicked, let me build so much more confidence than I could have previously, which I think is ultimately what made my final return so successful. Another thing that my experience with Critical Heat has taught me is to prioritize feeling motivated at all times when playing this game. There were many times throughout this experience where I'd be playing Critical Heat but be thinking, I can't wait to play all these awesome levels when I'm done with this, I just need to get this over with. I realized that if I just instead go play those levels, even if it meant taking an extended break from Critical Heat, it would keep my motivation high and still allow me to improve at the game. This is why I was able to enjoy my time with this level so much. I couldn't really end up feeling like the level was keeping me from doing anything, which has often been a source of annoyance. It's very well known at this point that I'm quite prone to dropping levels, so I just decided to embrace it, and it's definitely worked out for the best and confusingly led to me dropping levels less. Anyway, I think I've talked enough at this point about my overall experience with the level and what I've got out of it, so now I'm going to go through and talk about each part of the level in order. When I first started playing this level, this is the part I was always the most scared of. I had heard from so many people that the pre-drop in Critical Heat is impossible and makes it really hard to beat. However, I think the reality is actually the exact opposite. While 0 to 4 is definitely really hard, it being at the start of the level means you can build a lot of consistency with it, and the rest of this part up to 15 is effectively just click to the music and win without many nuances. This is debatably the easiest part of the level that doesn't last like 2 seconds, since it's once again a click to the music and win part that never really gave me much trouble if I wasn't tired. The only click which could throw me off that much is the first blue orb in the spider portal, since you wait a while before doing it and you have pretty high vertical momentum, which makes judging when to click pretty hard sometimes. The build-up cube here is probably the hardest part of the pre-drop, simply because of how easy it is to mind block it. There aren't even any problems really until you get to 32%. The red orb, blue orb, and dash orb at 32% are some of the most mind-blockable clicks I've ever come across in this game. Whether you can land in between the two spikes depends on a red orb which is pretty far away visually from the actual gap, and it's also very slightly off-sync from the music, which created so many opportunities for me to overcompensate for my deaths one way or another. The dash orb afterwards is hard for a similar reason. The gap you need to go between is visually separate from the actual timing enough that it sometimes felt like I was guessing when to click when I was losing focus in a session, so 32% became a place I'd get stuck if I was beginning to get tired while playing, which could very quickly prevent any more progress in the session. This is definitely a part to be wary of if you go for this level. The first part of the drop is, in my opinion, harder than any part in the pre-drop. Every single click has a pretty restrictive gap around it, and many clicks depend quite heavily on how you do the previous ones. For example, in the ship, UFO, and cube parts from 47 to 52. On top of this, some timings move into place after your window to react to them has ended, which means that you need quite a lot of confidence to know when to click. The blue orb at 45%, which was already a really hard click, is made especially hard by this, and become quite a large choke point if you're not careful. I also struggle with the double click red orb in the ball, just because I found it quite easy to be too trigger happy with my left hand and end up with a very spaced out double click. The spider from 57 to 60, for most of my time playing this level, was an insanely mind blockable part. It has the same thing with the gaps for timings moving in too late, and it's just easier to overthink for honestly no actual describable reason. This 4% stretch of the level contains a large chunk of my deaths in the second half. I had 155 attempts past 55 in total, and 45 of them died to this spider. However, for some reason, when I returned to the level most recently, this spider suddenly became essentially free and I stopped mind blocking it. I suspect that this is because my music offset was slightly different to before, making the spider sync better, and allowing me not to overthink myself so much on the timings. There is a pretty hard blue orb at 61, but after that it's very easy to get to the jewel, and I considered any death after 61 and before 67 to be a very dumb death. In my opinion, the start of the jewel is the hardest part of the level, and one of the hardest pieces of gameplay I've had to pull off in an extreme. Every click is both really hard and also ever so slightly off the music, and the wave is also made harder to read because of your second icon going in front of it at times. I particularly struggled with the release into the yellow portal at 73, because it didn't line up with my natural release timing, which was always too early, and the click just after that where you can live as the wave but still die to the cube timing below, making the gap very tight. I can't really say this part ever became easy for me, and it being so far into the level is incredibly terrifying. The level chills out a bit after 73, but that doesn't mean the gameplay isn't still really hard. Of particular note is the timing at 78, which is a tight gap on its own, but is made even harder by the fact that it depends so heavily on both when you clicked and how long you held before. I did get pretty good at this input in the end, but I know that for some people it's always a huge choke point. Here the jewel ramps up in difficulty again, since you need to set yourself up properly to be able to live with both your waves, which is a lot harder than it may seem, especially with nerves. It is comically easy to go too high with your bottom wave at 88, which causes you to become two balls and die in an entertaining way, which somehow only happened to me once from 0. The final two yellow orb inputs and their setup is a really big nerve test too, and killed me a lot in runs, although only twice from 0. Even after all the really hard gameplay you've just been through, the level throws one last hurdle at you, and it's a big one. The ship swoop from 93 to 94 is by far the most evil thing I've ever had to do with nerves, and I'm honestly shocked I only died to it twice. Even after that, the rest of the gameplay to the end is still very chokeable, and the last click is basically blind and you kind of have to just send it with some kind of audio cue. I fully expected to die to 98 and yet somehow I didn't. I almost never did any run from anywhere without dying to it first. So, that's Critical Heat. Despite some of the issues that there are in this level, I enjoyed the gameplay all the way through. Zeus made the player's icons move in such captivating ways throughout the drop, and it feels so satisfying to pull off with the music. I'm so proud of myself for being able to enjoy the level so much, even with all the mental challenges being thrown at me. I feel like this level has done so much for my mindset when playing this game, and I'll always be grateful for that. Before I do another new hardest, I will definitely be beating a good number of levels near the top of my skill range. I know now not to repeat the same mistakes I made 14 months ago. I want to thank everyone who stuck with me through this grind, turned up to my streams, got in VC with me, or cheered me on when I made progress. I really couldn't have enjoyed my time with this level nearly as much without all of you. I think I've said all I want to say about this level now. I've been writing this script for 3 hours and I really should sleep. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.